Pick my walk-up song instead. Hello. I did not pick my walk-up song. Good morning, everybody. How's everybody doing? We're good? All right, cool. Well, thank you all for having me. Very excited to be here with you all today to talk about innovation. Let's see if my slides want to come up. Hold on. Oh, we went too far. There we go. So very excited to talk to you all about innovation. And if you hear that word innovation and your first thought is generic, cliche, buzzword, overused, you are absolutely right. I think the word innovation gets thrown around way too often. And I think more importantly, the word innovation means different things to just about every organization who uses it. But for the sake of our conversation today, from what I learned during the decade I spent at Google where I taught innovation philosophy, all innovation really means is change. All innovation needs to mean is change. It's the story of how we react to change, how we embrace change, and most importantly, how you all as leaders drive change in everything that you do. And I doubt that I have to tell the people in this group after a year of tariffs and political shifts and cultural changes and diet trends and new technologies, I doubt I have to tell anyone in here just how important it is that we understand and capitalize on change. But the challenge we face is that every person in this room would probably like to believe that you're open to change. Whether you like change or not, probably every one of you would like to believe that you embrace new ideas, new strategies, new way of thinking, new technology. We all want to believe that about ourselves. But the truth is our human nature says the opposite. Human nature hates change. Human nature hates new. Human nature hates different. Human nature is what makes everyone in this room, everyone in the world, so subconsciously comfortable with that old cliche of we do it that way because that's the way we've always done it. And I think it's really important if we're going to have a conversation about innovation and about change, that we start with all of us on the same page in agreement that deep down in the back of our heads, in our subconscious, we hate new stuff. We hate change. All humans do. And if you disagree with that, if you disagree with me right now, that human nature is telling you to hate new and hate different and hate change, then I'd ask you all to stop and think for 5 seconds. Just think to yourselves, when is the last time you heard someone say something good, collectively, about Gen Z? The correct answer is never. That's never happened. No one has ever said anything good about Gen Z. Are there any Gen Zs in here? Proud with your hands, come on. I see a couple of shy hands going up. We hate you guys. We hate Gen Z. Gen Z is the worst generation ever, right? Their work ethic, their value systems, the way they communicate and connect, their addiction to selfies and YouTube and influencers. Worst generation ever. We hate Gen Z. But if you hired me to give this speech 10 years ago, I would have gotten up on this stage and said all the exact same things I just said, and then said, millennials, worst generation ever. We hate millennials, their work ethic, their value system, the way we connect. I know that's true because I've been giving this speech a while. And when I started giving it, I pulled this picture for this slide by going to Google and typing in generic hipster millennial. We always hate the next generation. 2,500 years ago, Aristotle said, young people today think they know everything, and they're always so sure about it. The next generation represents new. They represent change, they represent different. And our human nature says that's bad. Our human nature says the way I do things is right. The way I see the world is good. So a different way that threatens that challenges that, something that's new, inherently must be wrong, inherently must be worse. And that part of our human nature, that voice in the back of our head that tells us new is bad, it never screams as loudly as it does in our work, in our companies, in our jobs, in the things we know best, the things we've spent years or decades getting good at. Who's been in the rice industry for at least 10 years? 20 years, 30 years. I could go on and on, but I don't want to flag how old everybody is. This change it's hard to react to. It's hard to understand when people are telling you to do things differently when you've spent this much time getting good at something. So I want to start today of sort of showing a video of what this looks like in practice. And if you saw me speak here 3 years ago, this is an entirely different presentation except the next slide, which is a video. Because I show this video every chance I get, and I think it sets up this conversation well, of what it's like when change comes to your industry. when change comes to your business, new customers, new employees, new technologies, new cultural behaviors. So, any baseball fans in the room? Decent number. Okay, pretty good baseball crowd. Any Phillies fans? High and proud? Not one? All these people? Whatever. I'm a big baseball fan. I'm a big Phillies fan. I'd like to show you a video from a Major League Baseball game in Arizona, a Diamondbacks game, where the announcers for the Arizona Diamondbacks, who work in the industry of baseball and sell the product of baseball and work for Major League Baseball, when they looked around at their product and their business and the world at large and saw it changing. And I want to see if you can see sort of when their human nature takes over to tell them that change is bad.
Look at the one on the right. Do you have to make cases? Take something. Wait. That's the best one of the 300 pictures I've taken of myself today. Every girl in the picture is locked into her phone. Every single one is dialed in. Welcome to parenting in 2015. They're all just completely transfixed by the technology.
Let's go back to the game. Let's make fun of those girls some more.
Oh, hold on, I'd take a selfie with a hot dog, selfie with a churro, selfie just of a selfie.
Back to the game. Again, this is live TV. Back to the girls.
Here's my first bite of the churro. Here's my second bite of the churro. You know, the beauty of baseball is you can sit next to your neighbor and have a conversation, or you can just completely ignore it.
All right, this is the last part. Try to listen close here because this is the best part.
Accident this Saturday, tonight, it's only all single here at the floor, and nobody noticed.
That's my favorite part. Little single here in the fourth, and nobody noticed. I love this video. Now here's what I'd like you to do. I would like you to picture in your minds. You can close your eyes if it helps, but I'm not going to make you. Close your eyes and think to yourself, picture the two people you just heard talking. Their demographics, the two announcers for the Arizona Diamondbacks, age, race, gender. Who are those two people? What do they look like? Everybody got kind of an image in their head? You're right. Old white guys? Who are old white guys? Of course they're old white guys. Nothing against old white guys. I speak at a lot of ag conferences. I can't knock on old white guys. Someday I'm going to be an old white guy, so nothing against them. But not only are these old white guys, these are old white guys who have loved baseball for 60 years. Lived baseball, worked in baseball, played baseball, taught baseball, coached baseball. You know what Major League Baseball doesn't need any more of? 60-year-old white guys who have loved baseball for 60 years. They have every single one of them. You know what Major League Baseball desperately needs more of? 19-year-old girls that want to go to baseball games. You know what Major League Baseball desperately needs more of? People that want to go to baseball games and then go home and post their pictures and videos on Instagram and TikTok and Twitter. Every girl in this picture bought a ticket to the game. Every girl in this picture bought the overpriced ballpark food so they could take their picture of the first bite of the churro and the second bite of the churro. Most of them are wearing baseball shirts and they're all going home tonight to freely advertise Major League Baseball to their social networks. The greatest customers Major League Baseball could dream up in a lab are those 8 young women. But it looks weird. It looks wrong. It looks wrong to me, the guy that's been in this industry and knows how this industry is supposed to work. The challenge Major League Baseball faces, and I think it's exemplified by this video, but it's a challenge we all face in our businesses and our industries, in our individual jobs. Major League Baseball has been wildly successful for 150 years. Even as interest in baseball goes down, they're making billions and billions of dollars a year. Major League Baseball is very good at what they do. It can be very challenging to be good at something, to have expertise on something, and then have someone come in and say, hey, the world's changing, time for you to change everything about the way you do it. That thing you're great at, time to do it different. That thing you mastered, time to evolve. But that's what innovation requires us to do. That's what the world we live in requires us to do. And as we look ahead to the future, I think it's probably painfully obvious to all of us just how important change and innovation is going to be. And I know we're all from different parts of this industry, but even if we look back over the last, hold on, let me click. I'm having some clicker issues. Can you advance my next slide? There we go. Even if we look back over the last more than a century, we've watched as food production, agriculture, and farming in this country, every single year, We've required less people to feed more people. And who knows what the next 5 or 10 or 15 years are going to look like. So as we talk about innovation, I think this becomes our next question. Well, what's the world going to look like next week or next month or next year or next decade? What am I changing towards? What's technology going to open up? What markets are going to change? What political shifts are going to happen? What's going to be possible for my business next year? And I want to use that question, what's possible, as an opportunity to get to know you all a little better, because I think it's a really core part of sort of innovation, this idea of what's the future going to look like, what's going to be possible. So I want to ask you all a few questions, and we'll do just show of hands. We're going to vote with our hands. Talk about what's going to be possible in the future. I want to start by talking about this spaceship. Who knows the name of this spaceship? You can yell it out.
Millennium Falcon.
Millennium Falcon. Thank you to the cameraman up here who is very excited about Star Wars. If you don't know, this is the spaceship from Star Wars, and like every sci-fi story, every sci-fi movie and show you've ever seen, it's a super fast spaceship that has a loosely defined ability to hit a button or flip a switch. In the case of Star Wars, Han Solo says, "Punch it, Chewie," and he flips the lever, and all of a sudden, stars are whizzing past the windows. In Star Wars, they call this light speed. I think it's probably safe to say what they're talking about here, this invention, this innovation, this discovery, is traveling at the speed of light. Does anybody know how fast the speed of light is? Yell it out loud if you know. It's hard to hear. I can't tell if somebody's answering or not. I'll just tell you. It's 670 million miles per hour. That's how fast Han Solo and Chewbacca and Luke and Leia are flying, 670 million miles per hour. So I've said I want to get to know you all. I want to know what you think about innovation in the future. Who thinks that one day, maybe not in 5 years or 50 years, maybe in 5,000 years, with artificial intelligence and robotics and machine learning, could this one day be possible? Not definite, but who thinks this could be possible in our future? Hundreds of years, thousands of years? Okay, I'm going to say we got about a quarter of you, maybe just over a quarter. All right, let's do a different one. If you talk about Star Wars in your speech, it's only fair you also talk about Star Trek. The cameraman's even more excited about Star Trek. The great technology for moving people around in Star Trek, I used to call them teleporters, until one day after a speech, a very passionate Star Trek fan came up to me to tell me that they're actually called transporters in Star Trek. And it was very important to him that I understood that moving forward in my life. So, transporters. You stand on some platform, you say, "Beam me up, Scotty," and lasers like take apart your molecules and your atoms, and all of a sudden, you're standing on a different spaceship or a different planet. It sends your molecules through the airwaves and reassembles. Who thinks one day, again, the distant, distant future, could this be possible? Again, not definite, but possible. Who's with me? I see some hands slowly starting to go. Not that many, maybe 40 of you. Okay, so let's say that's 10% or so. We'll do one more. We'll do one from the greatest science fiction movie of all time, which is? The Land Before Time. This photographer. Got to be loud with your guesses. It's hard to hear up here. Forbidden Planet? No. This is, by the way, not an opinion-based question. It's a fact-based question. The greatest sci-fi movie of all time. Interstellar is a good guess. The most common guess, by far, Spaceballs. I don't know why. That's the most common guess by a landslide. But the greatest science fiction movie of all time, of course, is Back to the Future. Every time I put it up, you hear the same noise in the crowd. Everybody goes, "Ah," because now they realize, yes, Steve is right. Now, unlike teleporters and speed of light travel, I'm no scientist, but I got a pretty good idea how to invent a time machine. It's not that complicated. You need a flux capacitor, you need 1.21 gigawatts of electricity, and you got to get a DeLorean to go 88 miles per hour, right? Simple. And then bam, you're in the future, 10 years in the past, whatever it is. Usually we get the least amount of hands on this one, but let's see. In thousands of years of human development and technology and AI, who thinks one day humans could possibly invent literal time machines? Have any hands? A couple? 1, 2, okay. All right, I'm seeing 15 maybe. Let's say we got about 5% of you left with me. So we went from 25 to 10-ish to 5-ish. Makes sense, that's usually how it goes. Let's do something different now. Instead of looking ahead to the future and thinking about innovation, let's look backwards. I was doing some research online. I found that the USA Rice Millers Association was started in 1899, which says to me that in this time, 1899, around 900, when 39% of Americans are farmers, there could have been a meeting like this. So I'd like you to imagine you're at that meeting. In 1899, let's say it was the first ever meeting of the USA Rice Millers Association. And you come to that meeting, and a guy gets up on stage to talk about innovation. Maybe it was just as much of a buzzword in 1899 as it is now, I don't know. But that speaker can't talk about time machines and teleporters and Back to the Future because they don't exist yet. So instead, that speaker says, who thinks one day this could be possible? Someday I'll have this little device, and it'll fit in my hand. And I'll be able to aim it at my face and do a stupid dance. And instantly, billions of people in Africa and Asia and Europe will be able to instantly see the dumb dance I just did. And on the same thing that's only as big as my hand, I can watch billions of dances from billions of other people all over the world. As many as I want, as quickly as I want. I can see it perfectly and hear it perfectly all over the world in an instant. And says, who thinks one day that could be possible? How many hands do you think go up? I'm pretty sure it's 0. I think they might accuse me of being a witch. Burn me at the stakes just for suggesting that TikTok could one day happen. And to put it in context, if you're not sure what the answer would be, to put in context what the world was like in 1899, which in the grand scheme of things, 4 generations ago, it's not that long ago in the agriculture world. In 1899, sort of the hot new technology that was sweeping the country was the ice cream cone. That's when the ice cream cone got invented. So you're sitting in this room, half of you, the really cutting edge people, early adopters in the room, eating ice cream cones. The rest of you just, fistfuls of ice cream, just sort of licking it, I guess. And that speaker describes TikTok. There's no way any hands go up. That means that 4 generations ago, something as ubiquitous as a smartphone app was more impossible than the people in this room just told me traveling at 670 million miles per hour would be. That's 186,000 miles per second. And y'all think that's more likely to happen than your great-great-grandpa would have thought TikTok was. That's crazy. We live in the most crazy, exciting, weird, unpredictable time that humans have ever lived in. The world changes faster and more unpredictably than at any point in our human history because of what technology allows for. That's why I love talking about innovation, because it's an exciting time to talk about innovation. It's an exciting time to lead a team or to lead an organization with almost infinite possibilities ahead of you. I studied innovation for a long time, and I taught it for a long time at Google. And what I learned during my 10 years there, and from the 7 years since I left Google, doing things like this, I travel all over the world talking about innovation and artificial intelligence and digital strategy. What I've learned is that the most innovative organizations, the most innovative teams, the most innovative people I've ever worked with, they have one very clear thing in common, and it has absolutely nothing to do with technology. It's not about technical prowess or engineering or code. The most innovative people I've ever worked with, the thing they share in common is that they take the mindset we just talked about, that says anything is possible, the mindset that says the future could be anything, the mindset that makes us raise our hand for time machines, and they apply that mindset to everything. An innovative organization is one that questions everything, looks to improve everything. Not just big crazy stuff, not just your product, but the boring, routine, everyday, daily processes and procedures and tasks that everyone else in the world is going to take for granted. An innovative team questions them. An innovative culture questions them. Innovative culture says, just because we don't know a better way to do something yet, just because I don't know a better way to send emails or do expense reports, doesn't mean a better way isn't possible. Innovative cultures question everything. Even at Google, they let me teach innovation. I'm not an engineer. I don't know how to code. I am wildly average at all things technical. But they let me teach innovation because even at Google, innovation doesn't come from technology. It came from people, and it came from leaders. It came from leaders who could build a culture of ambition, open-mindedness, and curiosity. So what I want to talk to you about today with the rest of my time are 3 strategies, 3 principles to build an innovative culture for yourself and for your team and for your company. 3 things. That's all I'm going to ask you to remember today, is to do 3 things. To look for innovation everywhere, to prioritize iteration and feedback, and to embrace passions, curiosities, and skills. Super simple, right? Y'all with me so far? We're good? We're still awake? All right, cool. Let's keep going. So this is about looking for innovation everywhere. This is going to be our first strategy, our first principle. When I started teaching innovation at Google, hold on, I'll bring that guy up in a second. When I started teaching innovation at Google, I was asked to give presentations to large groups of new employees. I had these rooms full of marketers and accountants and engineers, and part of my job was to tell them that their jobs were not just marketing and accounting and engineering. It was all those things plus innovation. It was my job to tell them that there was no mysterious, mythical innovation team at Google whose job it was to challenge the status quo and ask the critical questions and come up with new ideas for the future. That was everybody's job. It was an expectation, not an additional thing you could do. It was something you were supposed to do, to be innovative, to think outside the box. And I think that sounds like an obvious and easy concept, but it is way easier said than done to drive innovation from everywhere. So I'll tell you a couple stories of what that looks like. And I'll start with a story from outside of Google. This is a guy named Richard Montanez. He was the son of Mexican immigrants who lived in a small town outside Los Angeles, where he and his 10 siblings picked grapes for a living. Until the 1970s, when Richard, who had already dropped out of high school because he couldn't really read and write in English, had the opportunity to apply for a job to become a janitor at a factory where they made Frito-Lay products. He applied for the job and he got the job, and it was a big deal because it paid 3 times what he made picking grapes. Worked the job for years, perfectly happy, making triple what he used to make picking grapes. All's good. Until the late 80s roll around, and Frito-Lay's not doing very well, having a few tough quarters, a few tough years. So the CEO of Frito-Lay decides to do something very simple and very important. He records a video of himself. And he asks for the video to be distributed to every office, warehouse, factory, every part of the company. And in the video, the CEO of Frito-Lay very simply says, hey, I want you all of you at this company, to feel like owners of this company. I want you to feel like this company is as much yours as it is mine. I want you to bring all of yourself to work. If you have ideas, I want to hear them. If you have suggestions, bring them. Bring your whole self to work. This is your company too. Very simple. And he sends that video to the whole company. Richard Montanez, factory janitor, does not know that it's a little bit strange for a factory janitor to pick up the phone and call the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. So that's what he does. Sees the video, calls the CEO. Gets the administrative assistant, she puts him through to the CEO. Richard says, hey, I saw your video and I've got an idea. CEO says, oh, that's great. So glad you saw it. I'm actually coming out to Southern California soon. Why don't you put together a little presentation and you can come give it to me and my team? So Richard goes home and he rents a book on marketing from the library so he can memorize a few sentences to say to sound smart. He buys a $3 clip-on tie and 100 little plastic bags. And he goes into his kitchen, he doodles a logo on each bag, and he gets out his spices. And he invents his own snack. Because his idea, his theory, his version of bringing his whole self to work is that Frito-Lay doesn't have any products that speak to the tastes he grew up with, to the flavors he grew up with, Hispanic foods, Mexican street foods, spicy products. So he builds his own snack, he goes in and he pitches it to the CEO of Frito-Lay and his team, and today we have Flaming Hot Cheetos, which Adweek will tell you was one of the 5 most popular snacks in America for each of the last 10 years in a row. Billions upon billions upon billions of dollars because of the idea of this janitor who dropped out of high school because he couldn't read and write English. And I really like this story. And Richard Montanez goes on to become an executive vice president at PepsiCo. Very inspirational guy. But my takeaway from this story is not about Richard Montanez. And what I'd like your takeaway to be, it's about the CEO. The CEO of a major corporation who took a few minutes to ask his employees for help. A CEO who was humble enough to say, I don't have all the answers. And if anyone has an idea, I don't care what your job is, what your level is, what your background is, if you have an idea to this company, I'm here for it. And when he got a phone call from a janitor, he took the phone call. And when the janitor said he had a suggestion, he scheduled a meeting. Innovation comes from everywhere, but it doesn't happen naturally. Leaders have to make it happen. It sounds easy, it sounds simple, but think about your workers. Think about your team. Think about your youngest people, your most junior people, your lowest level workers. Imagine if they had a suggestion for your operation that was totally unrelated to their job, outside their silo. And again, they're young and junior, they're 6 months into the job. Crazy idea. Would they tell anybody about it? Would they bring it to you? Would they know who to bring it to or how to bring it up? The answer is very often no. You'd be surprised at the quality of ideas and the insightfulness of questions that are sitting in people's heads right now because we as leaders haven't done enough to make it clear to them that we want that we want their suggestions, we want their help, we want their ideas. Innovation comes from everywhere. Sounds obvious. It's not. It doesn't just happen unless you make it happen. And this idea of innovation comes from everywhere. It's beyond even your team and your support system, your structure, your staff. Everywhere means everywhere. wherever you can get feedback and suggestions. This is Jeff Bezos. Everybody know what Amazon sold when it first launched? Books. Does anybody know the second thing Amazon sold after books when it started to expand? People don't usually know this. It was movies, CDs, DVDs, that sort of thing, because it's packaged very similar to books, lined up well in boxes and shelves. But in 1997, Jeff Bezos, who probably at the time was the world's foremost expert on e-commerce, decided Amazon should sell a third thing. But he didn't know what it should be. His team didn't know what it should be. So Jeff Bezos decided to write an email, and he sent it to 1,000 random Amazon customers. 1,000 people in 1997 get an email from Jeff Bezos. Very simple email that says, "What do you wish you could buy on Amazon?" And a couple hundred responded. And Jeff Bezos read those responses, and he'll tell you to this day, one of those responses, most important email he's ever received in his life. Somebody responded, "What do you wish you could buy on Amazon?" And the guy said, "Windshield wiper blades. Because right now my car needs new windshield wiper blades." That was it. If you were waiting for something profound or genius idea, that was it. At its core, an awful idea. If in 1998 you go to Amazon to buy your books, your CDs, and your windshield wiper blades, it'd be a very strange website. But that idea was enough to trigger in Jeff Bezos' mind that e-commerce, this was the solution to timeliness. It was a solution to need. People would actually be willing to go online to buy anything if they need it right now, which was actually a pretty novel concept in 1997. We take that for granted today, but in 1997, no one had really thought that way. Part of innovation comes from everywhere is the importance of getting ideas and feedback and suggestions from people who don't look like you and sound like you and think like you. Too often, our marketers want to get ideas from other marketers. Our farmers want to get ideas from other farmers. Our lawyers want ideas from other lawyers. People in the rice industry want ideas from other people in the rice industry. You already know that. You already have that background and that expertise. Go get input and innovation and feedback and ideas from other people with different perspectives. You can filter those ideas through your own knowledge. Jeff Bezos took his expertise on e-commerce and used it to build from that weird little windshield wiper blade idea. That's part of the innovation process. It's building off of the feedback you get, the suggestions you get. A half-baked idea, a bad idea, a crazy idea is far more valuable, far more productive than a good idea that stays in someone's head forever. Anyone can build off of fragmented, half-baked ideas as long as somebody says it out loud, as long as some leader goes and asks for it. And again, this idea of innovation from everywhere, it expands even more as we sit here in 2025 and we think about things like artificial intelligence. And of course, artificial intelligence has a million applications, and we're all building it into our farm equipment and our operations and our factories and our software systems. But if you yourself, not your company, not your industry, you yourself sitting in a chair right now, are not using one of these tools or a similar tool every single day, you are falling wildly behind. I can't state that more strongly. As a source of ideas, as a source of feedback, as a source of inspiration. The smartest business partner you've ever had is sitting online for free to help you expand your way of thinking, to help you explore new perspectives and new ideas and new concepts. Innovation comes from everywhere. It means your team, it means your customers, it means AI, it means your friends, your family, your social media circles, the people in this room. Get comfortable getting loud about your business, your challenges, your goals. Get comfortable talking about those things because you have no idea who might be able to help. I'm going to end each of these sections with a first step. It's a long slide. For those of you that were taking pictures earlier, this is the slide to take a picture of maybe. Everything I'm going to talk about today you're going to agree with. I feel pretty strongly about that. I think you're going to nod along to everything I say today. You're going to say, that makes sense. Innovation, remember, get ideas from more places. That makes sense. That sounds good. But there's a very real question over whether or not you're going to go home after this conference and do anything different. You're going to agree, you're going to smile, you're going to laugh at the baseball selfies, and then you're going to go home. And you can go back to doing things the way you did, or you can change. If you'd like to change in as little amount of time and with as little effort as possible, do these first steps. This is step one. for Look for Innovation Everywhere. It'll take you 2 minutes. Write an email to your employees or to your partners, to your customers, whoever it might be, write an email. If you want to tell them about this speech as your excuse for emailing, that's fine. I just went to Rice Outlook. I saw the speaker. He talked about innovation. It made me want to tell you guys that moving forward, if you have any ideas or thoughts or suggestions, I want to hear them. Your leadership wants to hear them. The business manager or owner or CEO wants to hear them. And it is okay if those ideas are weird, if they're outside the box, if you don't know how we'd pay for them, if you don't know if they're possible, if it's not related to your job, that's fine. I just want my people to know that if you have ideas or questions or suggestions, I'm here for it. That's it. 2 minutes to get started on this journey. Number 2, prioritize iteration and feedback. By far, this is my favorite of the 3 principles. It's the one I use the most with my consulting clients and also the ones I use the most for myself running a business. And at Google, I think prioritize iteration and feedback kind of meant 2 things, the iteration side and the feedback side. And we'll talk about how they come together. But when we talk about iteration, prioritize iteration, it always makes me think of this. I don't know if you recognize this, but this is the first ever Google homepage. This is what Google looked like in 1998. Looks a little different. I don't remember this page very well. I was, I guess, 10 probably when this came out. The part I'd like you to notice is right below the search bar, right below the buttons. I don't know if you can read it, but it says, index contains 25 million pages, soon to be much bigger. Now, I'd imagine that in 1998, being able to create a website that could essentially instantly organize 25 million resources was probably mind-blowingly impressive. Probably truly cutting edge, the ice cream cone of its time, just blowing people's minds. But right there in the middle of their one and only product, the 2 guys at Google said, soon to be much bigger. And to me, this was the first example of them doing something that was crucial to how Google has operated since, and I believe it is the foundational building block of innovation. I like to think that they labeled this product as version 1. This is version 1 of Google. Index contains 25 million pages, soon to be much bigger. We might not know how to make it bigger yet. We might not have the money or the knowledge or the skills, but we will. Because this is version 1, and as soon as we label something version 1, it forces us to say that at some point there will be a version 2. We need to get comfortable as leaders labeling every part of our operation, from our product to our process to our procedures to our people, as version 1. You would be shocked if you really looked through the daily tasks of yourself and your team, how many things you're doing that have never been updated, never been changed, never been questioned, because we took for granted that that's done. We figured out the best CRM system. We're done. We figured out the best way to plow this field. We're done. We finished. We mastered it. When we start labeling things as version 1, it tells us that as the world changes, we need to change too. That's what the guys at Google did. I tried to find how many pages were in the index today. The last time they released the data was actually like 9 years ago. It was 2016. So it's probably changed a lot in the last 9 years, but does anyone want to guess? In the 18 years, from 1998 to 2016, the index went from 25 million pages. Anyone want to guess how many pages were in the index by 2016? Light speed? I don't even know how to answer that.
625 million.
625 million. Any other guesses? Billions? Trillions? How many trillions? 60 trillion? You're getting there. It's 130 trillion. Hold on, I got to click my slide so you can see all the zeros. There we go. 130 trillion. 130 trillion. That's roughly 17,000 web pages per person on the planet. This doesn't happen if in 1998, Larry Page and Sergey Brin say, index contains 25 million pages. Yes! We did it. God, we're so smart. We nailed it. We are the best at search. Right now, here in 1998, we are the best in the world at what we do. Yes. Moving on. Something else. Instead, they said soon to be much bigger. Instead, they said we don't know how, but we will make this better because we have to make it better. Because it's version 1. That's prioritized iteration. But the other side of this, how we decide what we sort of iterate towards, what version 2 should look like, is feedback. How do we incorporate feedback? Which is, again, a core component to innovation. And that always makes me think of a story that this guy tells. Anyone know who this is? I heard it over there. Tony Robbins. Probably the most famous motivational speaker of all time. And Tony Robbins has this story about before he became famous motivational speaker, Tony Robbins. He had a sales job. He used to have to give sales pitches, sales presentations, and ironically, was bad at it. Every time he got reviewed by customers, his peer reviews, his performance reports from his boss, low scores on sales presentations. Oh, I broke the PowerPoint. Low scores on sales presentations. But very motivated guy, Tony Robbins, as you'd probably guess. So he goes to his boss and says, you know what, boss? Start sending me out on 3 times as many sales pitches because I want to practice. I want to get good. I want to evolve. I want to get better. So he does. And for months, Tony goes out on sales pitch after sales pitch, trying to get good at this. And after a few months, he sits down with his boss. They gather up all his performance reviews, all his customer surveys, all his peer reviews, crunches all the numbers. Exact same. Exact same as before he started. And he said, that's when I realized, one of my favorite quotes of all time, especially about something like innovation. Tony says, that's when I realized that practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes consistent. Practice plus feedback makes perfect. Tony got really good at doing things the way he did them. Really comfortable at doing things the way he did them. Innovation, when it's done correctly, is not an individual endeavor. It is a team sport. There's a very real limit to how good we can make anything when it's just in our head, on our computer, in our notebook. And that limit expands, and it expands quickly. The more perspectives and the more ideas and the more opinions, the more questions we get. Often the failure to innovate is when we do things too much on our own, when we're uncomfortable voicing our ideas, when we're uncomfortable asking for help. That's where innovation can fail. And I think what Tony realized during this process is not only do we need feedback, not only do we need more feedback, we need it earlier. What Tony did wrong was that he got all this feedback, tons of feedback, and then after 3 months he looked at it. Tony should have gone on one sales pitch, got some feedback, analyzed it, thought through it, and then updated and adjusted his approach for his second sales pitch. We don't get feedback early enough. I think far too often, especially when we're trying something new, when we have a weird idea, an outside-the-box idea, the ideas that most need feedback, that most need other perspectives, we want to keep it to ourselves because that human nature makes us afraid. It makes us feel like we're taking a risk. It makes us not want to be judged that our idea might be bad. But again, that's really counterproductive to innovation. The story at Google I always think of with this idea of getting feedback faster and more is this. Does anybody know what these are? I think I heard it, Google Glass. Did anyone in this room, this is my favorite question, ever own a pair of Google Glass? Okay, one guy back there, the tech guy. So between me and him, this ties the record for most hands that have ever gone up at 2. Not a huge commercial hit, Google Glass, but if you don't remember, it came out around 2012. It was kind of the precursor to every Meta, Vision, Apple Pro, Quest, whatever, augmented reality, virtual reality. It turned you into RoboCop, right? Glasses with a lens that you interact with your voice and your hand motions. In 2012, crazy product. Very innovative, very cutting edge. Didn't really catch on. I think part of the reason it didn't catch on is because of the media, it's my opinion. Because those of us who worked at Google at the time, we had Google Glasses. And we'd wear them around San Francisco and Northern California, where Google's headquarters were, where I lived. And we'd wear them out to bars and restaurants. You know what the media affectionately started calling us, and then everyone started affectionately calling people who wore Google Glass? We were called glass holes. That was the term for people who wore Google Glass out in public. So not a big commercial hit, but the story of how Google Glass came to be, I think, is really valuable, really insightful. So one day some young woman walks into the Google X team. That's the team that built it. They're called Google X. And she says, hey, I think we could build like RoboCop glasses. No one's ever done this before. It's crazy. It's outside the box. I think we could do it. Augmented reality glasses. How long do y'all think it took from the time she spoke those words to the time they had a working, wearable prototype? Not the final version they sold, but something you could put on your face and turn on. How long do you think that took? I need some guesses. A week? 5 years? We started a week and 5 years. Anything in between? Hours? Hours? You're catching on to sort of my thing here. 45 minutes. 45 minutes. This is the earliest picture that exists of it, so I'm sorry the quality's not great. And it's absurd looking, right? It looks like they put a laptop in a book bag and ran a bunch of cords to a phone that appears to be taped onto some racquetball goggles And it's nonsensical, but there's a really important reason they did this, and it comes back to this concept of iteration and feedback. This is a really outside-the-box idea, a really new thing for Google X. As soon as they possibly could, that team of engineers wanted to get this idea out of that woman's head and into a version where everyone else on the team could see it and put it on and touch it and feel it and contribute. At a lot of organizations, they would have said, hey, cool idea, go work on it for a year. Go work on it for 6 months, run some simulations, do some research, then come back to us and show us what you got. Instead, the Google X team said, in 45 minutes, we want to start giving you feedback. In 45 minutes, we want to start giving you more perspective. One of the great failings, again, people have with innovation, it comes to how we brainstorm, how we ideate. And I've seen this across so many companies and teams and so many job functions. We need to get comfortable brainstorming out loud in a room together. When you give your team or yourself some new challenge, some new goal, some new thing you're trying to accomplish, don't let them all scatter to come up with their ideas and their approaches and how their team's going to address it. Brainstorm together, out loud. It's uncomfortable. It feels weird. It feels like you're taking a risk, putting yourself out there, but it'll move you ahead so much faster. It'll help you develop your ideas so much more thoughtfully. And this idea of iteration and feedback, it can also it goes in a lot of directions. I think a lot of different things can happen. Again, it took years for Google to finally start selling that product. But at the time when Google was going from version 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 of Google Glasses, getting all this feedback, again, the final product didn't really catch on, but they learned a lot through the journey because the journey was done out in the open, because the journey was collaborative. And when that happens, when your teams do that, when they work together on things out loud, there's an opportunity to take bits of the journey and use them in other places, to take the knowledge you gained and the skills you gained. Because even when the final product is a failure, it doesn't mean the process was a failure. It doesn't mean the people are failures or the research is a failure. So at the time Google Glass was quote unquote failing, there were other teams at Google who were involved, who could look at those early versions and say, you know what, there's stuff to be saved there. There's stuff we can use there. Because in 2012, through Google Glass, Google engineers probably had more knowledge and infrastructure and data on augmented reality and virtual reality than anyone in the world. So other teams at Google could use this too. There's another team at Google around that time, it's called Niantic Labs. They've since been spun out by Google to be its own company, but at the time, they also wanted to use augmented reality, but they wanted to use it to make games. So they took a lot of those early versions of Google Glass, of that data, of that research, even some of those engineers. Does anybody know what Niantic Labs used all that stuff to make? Pokemon Go. Which last year passed, just want to make sure I say this clearly, last year passed $9 billion in revenue. Pokemon Go. Last year passed and it's a mobile app, so the margins are wonderful. $9 billion from the failed bones of glass holes. Because they iterated, because they took the feedback, they did it out in the open. And companies get this wrong all the time. Entire industries get this wrong all the time. Those industries who say version 1 is good enough, it works, we don't need to change regardless of what the feedback says. Whether that's feedback from our peers, from the world, or from our customers. And the most clear example of that you'll ever see is what happened to the taxi industry when Uber came along. And I think the taxi industry might like to position this. A lot of industries like to position it as we got blindsided. Uber came out of nowhere and took over. And I found this chart. I don't know how well you can see it, but this is the number of ride app trips in New York City by taxi, Uber, and Lyft's on there too, but we're not talking about them. You can see the Uber line goes up pretty quick to catch the yellow line. That was about 3 years in New York City. It took about 3 years for Uber to catch up to taxis in New York City. So taxis had 3 years. It's not exactly getting blindsided, but that's relatively quick. 3 years for some new thing to come along. Do y'all know where Uber launched? Because it wasn't New York City. It was San Francisco. Do you know when Uber launched in San Francisco? 2009. It's so far over to the left that 2009 isn't even on the chart. Oh, I'm jumping. Hold on. There we go. So far over that it's not even on the chart. It took about 8.5 years from the time of the first Uber trip to the time they caught up to taxis in New York City. 8.5 years. of taxi companies watching the world change, of watching their customers demand new things, of watching new technologies become available. You know what the taxi industry did during those 9 years? Absolutely nothing. Nothing. You don't think every taxi in New York City could have a GPS, could have a mobile app that you call it with, could have a virtual payment system instead of having to pay with cash? Of course they could have done that. You know how many billions of dollars go through taxis in New York? It's a massive industry. But they felt like version 1 was good enough because for 60 years, 70 years, version 1 was good enough. They were successful for decades. For taxis, version 1 worked well enough. Times were good enough. They didn't get blindsided, they got complacent. And it happens to all of us when times are good. It happens to all of us when we feel like we've mastered something, when we feel like we're experts on something. It's going to happen with artificial intelligence a ton in the coming months and years. People are going to lose jobs, companies are going to get wiped out, and if in 2 years you're sitting in the audience somewhere, some room, and you say, man, I lost my job, I got blindsided by AI, you're lying. Because we see it coming. If you're not taking it serious now, then you're not iterating. Then you're not listening to the feedback. You're not willing to go to version 2 of the way you do things. I said I'll give you a first step for each of these. When I'm not on stages, I do a lot of workshops with smaller groups, companies, boards, that sort of thing. And of all the exercises we do on innovation, of all the brainstorms we do, by far the most interesting and valuable is a very simple version 1 brainstorm. So the next time you get your team together, team meeting, staff call, whatever, take 15 minutes, 20 minutes, and carve out an opportunity to do a V1 exercise. Again, you can tell them about this speech if it's helpful, but essentially I want you to ask your team, your employees, to point to anything they can think of. Give them some notebooks, post-it notes. Think of anything they can see within their job, within their company, within the technology you use, the processes you use, that feels like it's still on version 1 because no one has asked. Are the chairs they sit on too old? Are the way you do your weekly staff calls out of date? Are people doing things a certain way because that's the way they've done it for 10 years and that's the way their predecessor did it before them? God, especially in agriculture, are we doing it that way because our father did it that way and our grandparents did it that way? Allow your team to find the things that no one is questioning, to find the things that no one has asked. Can it be better? Can it be bigger? Can it be faster? And most importantly, and this is a core advice for any time you brainstorm with your team, anytime you brainstorm with yourself, throw away the old idea of sort of politeness that says don't bring up a problem if you can't offer a solution. That's not how brainstorming works. Tell your team it's okay to point at a problem and say, hey, our CRM system just feels real clunky. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what would be better. It feels clunky. That's great. That's fine. If you tell them they have to answer the questions, they're going to ask a lot less questions. And that hurts brainstorming. Number 3, last one, this will be the quickest. Embrace passions, curiosities, and skills. Google has this thing that maybe some people have heard of. It's called 20% time or 20% projects. It was this idea at Google that you're meant to be allowed to take up to 20% of your time to work on anything you want. Anything that you think would be of value to Google and value to the world. 20% of your time. It doesn't always work in practice, but we try. We try to do that at Google. That's like 1 day a week to work on whatever you want, which is not replicatable by 99.9% of companies in the world. But there's 2 reasons Google does this, and I think they're things we can sort of replicate for ourselves. The first is obvious. Any opportunity you have to give yourself or your people the opportunity to work on things they care about, that they're excited about, that they're curious about, that they're interested in, that they have skills related to, of course they'll bring more of themselves to the job. Of course they'll try harder. They'll be more creative, more ambitious, more innovative. Even if it's not 1 day a week, if it's 1 day a year, if it's 1 hour a month, giving your people the opportunity to say, hey, I work in this part of the business, but I'm really interested in that part of the business. Give them an hour to go experiment with it, to think about it, to collaborate with people over there. And that's the second reason Google does 20% projects, is for collaboration. What 20% projects allow at Google is for collaboration across silo. Because we find somebody from marketing and from Android and from search and from legal who are all interested in the same thing, all passionate about the same thing, and they end up working together. And you hope they build a great new product and it makes a ton of money, but even if it doesn't, They get to go back to their teams now with all these new things they learned from other parts of the business, from other people with other backgrounds, and there's value in that. And probably my favorite Google 20% project of all time, the one I thought was the coolest, was this. Anybody recognize this? I see some heads nodding. Anybody know what it's called? Cardboard. It's called Google Cardboard. Pretty simple. There were two engineers in Paris for Google who thought the future of the world, this is like 2011, the future of the world will be in 3 dimensions. It'll be virtual reality, augmented reality. This is way before the metaverse and all that nonsense. And if the future of content, of information, is in 3 dimensions, and in 2011 the only way to get into 3 dimensions is to buy a $2,500 Oculus Rift, then entire generations of people in low-income school districts and third-world communities are going to fall behind. We want to fix this. So with their 20% project, they designed a perforated sheet of cardboard with 2 glass discs in it. And when you fold it along the lines and put a smartphone in the front slot and access any sort of 3-dimensional content online, you can hold it up to your face and it makes a viewfinder that allows you to have a virtual reality experience. Unlike the $2,500 Oculus Rift, these cost about a nickel to make. And we gave away millions of them for free. And it was a really cool product. I had a bunch of these. They're really fun to play with. But probably the coolest application is when this little girl, whose name was Tegan, was born in a Minneapolis hospital missing one of her lungs and with only half of a heart. After a couple days in the hospital, she was sent home with her parents so that she could live her last few days at home before she passed, because this was not something that could be fixed. This is not a surgery that could be done. As you can imagine, Tegan's parents did what all of us would do. They frantically reached out to every hospital they could possibly find. They sent requests to 300 hospitals across the US, saying, will someone at least try to save Tegan? And they got that case seen by the Miami Children's Hospital, which was known for having kind of an innovative surgical center. They tried new things. And that surgical team gets together once a week to talk about new cases. Somebody brought up Tegan's case. And it just so happens that the week before, a member of that surgical team had been gifted a Google Cardboard by his nephew. And he theorized that if we could build a 3-dimensional model of baby Tegan's heart, and everyone on the surgical team could dive into it together, and we could plan the surgery collaboratively in 3 dimensions, in virtual reality, then maybe there is something we could do for this little girl. There's a really cool 60 Minutes on this, and it shows like the whole surgical team in a room just spinning around with their cardboard on their face, looking at the heart, planning the surgery, and it worked. And that little girl's alive because 2 engineers at Google's Paris office thought it was important, thought it was worth doing, to build a way for everyone to have access to 3 dimensions, to virtual reality. And I love that story, and it's warm, and it's fluffy, and it's nice. Google's got like 150,000 employees. If you're going to give them 1 day a week to do whatever they want, that's expensive. It sure would be nice to make some money. We did not make much money from Google Cardboard. I'm sure we lost money because we gave away millions of them. Other famous Google 20% projects include the world's most popular email, the world's most popular map. And does anybody know what AdSense is? It's the platform that lets Google put ads on websites. The last time they reported it separately, which was like 8 years ago, it did around $44 billion that year in revenue. These pay for every 20% project 1,000 times over. And these are projects that people at Google chose to take on for themselves. And this isn't some like new agey Silicon Valley idea, this 20% concept. 3M has had 15% culture since 1970. It's the top thing they publicize on their jobs page. It's the first thing you find, because they know that's attractive to people. Hey, come here, we'll give you some time and some space and some resources for you to tell us what's important, for you to tell us what you care about. We'll give you a little bandwidth to pursue those things you're interested in. If you want to read an article when you leave here today, there's an excellent article in the Harvard Business Review called The Innovation Mindset in Action, 3M Corporation. And what you'll find if you read it, what 3M does so well in their program is they give countless opportunities for their scientists to share with each other. Innovation centers, technical councils, technical forums, countless opportunities for scientists to get up in front of a room of their peers and say, hey, this is what I'm working on. This is what I'm excited about. Last one. You might not have a logical way to incorporate this sort of system yet. The first step is not carving out hours or days or building a program. The first step is spending more time with your team, with your people, and learning what they're interested in, learning what they're curious about, learning the parts of the business that if they had a few extra hours or days or 1% time or 20% time, what would they want to work on? What are they good at? What skills do they have? What interests do they have? Go learn about each other and share those things with your team. You'll be surprised how you'll eventually find applications for it. I want to end with one last story, and I think it kind of wraps up maybe my big fear as I talk to you all today. And it goes back to what I said at the beginning about innovation comes from everywhere. I can't imagine anyone in this room disagrees much with the things I said today. I think, again, I saw a lot of head nodding. I saw some note taking and pictures. But I think the reason, and I said this at the beginning, why so many of you will go back to your jobs and your teams and do absolutely nothing different is because for a lot of us, we see innovation as additive. It's like a bonus. It's something we could do for fun to do extra. But that's not how we need to think of innovation. And it makes me think of this story from Walmart. One of the reasons Walmart is as successful as it is, and there's a lot of reasons, but they're incredibly good at logistics. It's part of how they built into the empire they have now. And part of that is how efficiently they move stuff around, how efficiently they load trucks and move boxes. In order to facilitate that, every Walmart warehouse is equipped with these step ladders that their drivers, their loaders are asked to use. The problem was for years, the step ladders these loaders were given were kind of big and kind of bulky, and people didn't like using them. So for years, a lot of Walmart trucks were going out not filled all the way to the top because their workers weren't using the provided step ladders because they didn't want to. That hurts Walmart's logistics. That hurts the bottom line. Until one day, a warehouse worker decided he wanted to do his job well. He wanted to do his job right, but he also hated those ladders. So being an innovative guy, he goes home. That's him on the stage. He goes home, and he decides to build his own step stool. Smaller, lighter, easier to use. I think the original was like PVC piping and plastic. I'm not exactly sure. And he uses it for months, for years. His little docking bay, his way of loading trucks, he uses the thing he came up with. Until eventually that idea gets bubbled up. Some manager, some leader sees it, and it gets to Doug McMillon, the CEO of Walmart. And Doug McMillon brings that guy out on stage at the Walmart Investor Conference. And then he brings this little step stool out on stage. Doug McMillon tells the story, he says, what a great idea this guy had. Walmart's now going to manufacture his design because it's better than ours. And we're going to give it to every truck driver, every warehouse worker are going to use this guy's design. And Doug McMillon says, you know what? It's going to save us $30 million a year just by taking this guy's design. And everybody claps and everybody cheers and it's great and it's the investor conference. So of course that's the way he says it. But when I think about innovation, when I think about what we're talking about today, when I think about this story, my takeaway is not this. My takeaway is for how many years did Walmart lose $30 million? Because no one asked the warehouse workers if they had any ideas. Because no one from the corporate office collaborated with any warehouse workers. Because no one asked the warehouse workers if there might be a version 2 of their equipment. There's a very real, tangible, economic cost to good ideas that stay in people's heads. There's a tangible economic cost to not doing these things, to not innovating. So when you go home after this conference, do something, anything different. I'll end it with that and say thank you all very much.